As I understand, it can take 3 to 5 minutes for all the platforms to sync up. So I would expect we start within 3 to 5 minutes at the latest.
Well, it's good to see you again.
It's good to see you too. I saw Dr. Wilson today at the State House. So yeah.
All right, we are up. Welcome everybody to our Wellness on Wednesdays this evening. Very excited to have everybody. We have some esteemed panelists that we'll be going through. I'm going to kick us off with a short prayer, and then we'll do introductions, and then we'll start down our program for today. So this is Men Starting the Year Off Right. I Choose to Live, Cancer Education and Awareness. Let's get started. Dear gracious Lord and Heavenly Father, we thank you for another day. We thank you for the opportunity to learn more about our bodies. Your word says that our bodies are a temple for you, and we need to be good stewards of all that you've given us. Help this session to go well. Help us to learn, get knowledge, turn that into wisdom. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. All right. I'm going to read the bios of our panelists. We're going to start with Dr. Burnett Gauman. He is a eternal student with many interests. As a physician, he's focused on the health and welfare of all humanity, and especially eradicating health disparities. As a historian, he has studied, taught, lectured, and written topics, including the diasporan, and African American history and culture. As an amateur genealogist, he's traced his paternal family line to the 18th century Angola. He's published 2 novels and authored and co-authored several books on history and culture. He's also a science fiction buff, former musician, and race man. Melanie Sland. Melanie serves as program director for the Medical University of South Carolina Hollings Cancer Center Office of Community Outreach and Engagement. In her role at Hollings, Melanie provides program and operational oversight of the COE program. As the COE community health educator, she plans, conducts, and assesses community education and outreach outlined with the National Cancer Institute and MUSC Hollings Cancer Center research and outreach priorities within local and regional underserved communities. Henry Well has extensive experience in the nonprofit arena. For more than 15 years, he served in senior management roles with the National Kidney Foundation and the American Cancer Society. In his current position at the SC Cancer Alliance, he oversees the planning, organizing, and execution of Alliance initiatives, which includes the development of the state cancer plan, public and patient education, marketing, and communications, managing the administrative needs of the organization. And finally, we have Lee Moultrie, who's been a healthcare advocate for the past 24 years, retired from the Air Force, and he is a native Charlestonian. He's also a 9-year prostate cancer survivor and served on the executive board of South Carolina Cancer Alliance in 2005. He's a prostate cancer ambassador for the following: the SCAMEN project through Hollins Cancer Center of MUSC in Charleston, South Carolina, University of Florida Health, Proton Therapy Institute out of Jacksonville, Florida, and the Prostate Health Education Network based out of Boston, Massachusetts. This January, he was appointed to the oldest and largest publicly funded cancer clinical trials group within the United States for the next 5 years. Welcome, and thank you, panelists, all for showing up. And what's going to happen is we're going to go through a series of questions that have already been outlined. And then at around 7:25, we're going to open it up to questions from everyone who's watching. And we'll go until about 8 o'clock. So we have a lot to go through. And I'm going to kick us off. The first thing we want to do is, Mr. Well, we wanted you to go through some statistics about which cancers are most prevalent for men.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And I have to start out by saying I have worked with every single person on this panel, and it has been a privilege. I was with Lee this morning at the State House. I did an Evidence Academy with Dr. Gallman, and I talk almost daily with Melanie Slan down at MUSC. So my name is Henry Well. I'm the executive director of the Cancer Alliance. And the Cancer Alliance is the organization who really kind of monitors the data in South Carolina. And we design programs to address the data and identify partners so we could save more lives in South Carolina. So back in September, we released a report, and the report, it has good news. The overall cancer death rate in our state has declined by 25% over the last 25 years. The death rates in males have decreased by 31% over the last 25 years. So I want to start off the presentation by giving you that data, that the fact that the death rates have declined by 31% over the last 25 years. There's a lot of work to be done. But as I move forward with my presentation, you're going to hear alarming data, and we should be alarmed. But I don't want anyone to think that there is a lot of doom and gloom, because in the world of cancer, there is huge amounts of opportunity, and it all comes if we could rally together to link men to a medical home. Okay. So the leading causes of death in males in South Carolina is lung cancer, prostate cancer, colorectal, pancreatic, and liver cancer. Okay. What I want you to remember from this is the big three: lung, prostate, and colorectal. They all have screening tests. Okay. And if we could get men to go in and see a doctor and get these tests, a lot of these deaths can be prevented. So I'm going to start off talking about lung cancer. Lung cancer has the highest death rates in the state for men and women. Lung cancer, the death rates decreased by 45% in men. There is a screening test for lung cancer. It's low-dose CT scan. Many of these deaths can be avoided by receiving screening. Lung cancer is different than a lot of the other screenable cancers, and the reason is lung cancer is caused by smoking, and there's a lot of shame behind smoking and getting screened. So we need to break down the barriers and encourage former smokers and current smokers to go in and get screened for lung cancer. I was talking to several doctors, and I was like, why aren't we seeing the lung cancer screening rates increase in our state? And he's like, Henry, patients come in and they reek of smoke. But when I ask them, do they smoke? No, I don't smoke. So a lot of people, we have barriers there. So if we can just increase the lung cancer screening rates, that would be awesome. Let's see, prostate cancer. Prostate cancer, this is the big one. And Lee's going to talk about this in more detail later on. prostate cancer death rates have decreased 50% over the last 25 years. However, African American men are 2.3 times more likely to die than their white counterparts. And there's various reasons behind this. Many reasons behind this, from the screening guidelines to barriers to care to mistrust. Dr. Gallman spoke at one of our evidence academies several years ago on a lot of the reasons why we see these barriers. But if we can get men in to go in and receive the PSA, and it's not a reliable test, but it's kind of all we have right now, we can change those outcomes. So when it comes to colorectal cancer, the overall death rate since 1996 have decreased by 37%. We're seeing a lower decrease in African American men. Again, we have the colonoscopy, we have the Cologuard, we have the screenings in place to screen for lung, prostate, and colorectal. We just need more African American men to reach out and have a medical home. So the biggest cancers from death: lung cancer, number 1, prostate cancer, number 2, colorectal cancer, number 3. Big thing again about these cancers, if we have screening tests to detect these cancers in the earliest stage. So that is really all that I have. The data is very basic. African American men are dying at a higher rate than their counterparts. We released a report, and this is available on our website maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and we listed the various barriers that we've seen based on the data, and a pretty large focus group that we did. We need to break down the barriers. We need to build trust, and we need to expand or create programs, screening programs that are geared towards men with a focus on African American men. The Cancer Alliance, last year, we received $500,000 from the state legislator. And the point of the program was to go in our underserved communities, mainly in the PD and the upper Midlands, the counties that have the highest death rates, and just pay for cancer screening for men. There's no guidelines. The federally qualified health centers, they determine who's eligible. And what we're seeing is these programs, we've screened 111 men since July, and mainly they've been screened for prostate cancer. But we're not seeing the amount of referrals come through. And I know Dr. Gallman, I don't mean to put you on the spot, has some insight behind this. We just have to keep on rallying the troops, encouraging men to go in and talk to their doctor. At the Alliance, I want to restate this. Our goal is not to have men memorize the screening guidelines. Our goal is to have men go in and see their doctor, period. And then hopefully the doctor will talk to them about the appropriate cancer screening. A call up to the national level is to get them to take a look at the prostate cancer screening guidelines and do something, especially for the states that are seeing a higher death rate from prostate cancer than others. So that's all I got.
Awesome. Oh, thank you very much. I'm gonna do a quick follow-up question. I forgot to mention to everyone who's watching that you can ask questions. If you don't want your name to be out there, you can select anonymous. There is a Q&A section for both Zoom, comments in Facebook, comments in YouTube as well. Let me follow up just so we're clear with one question, Mr. Well. You talked about medical home. You're talking about having a home doctor and maybe having an annual, at minimum, having an annual visit. Can you just talk a little bit more about when you say medical home, what the expectations are?
Yeah. So yep. Here I will. I'm talking my internal language. We want men to have a doctor. We want men to have a doctor that they're comfortable with. We don't want men to wait until they're 40 or 50 or 60 before they have a doctor, because what we're seeing, we're talking about cancer tonight, obviously, but it's also true for diabetes, cardiovascular disease. We want every man, just like women, even if they're 20, to go in to MUSC or Fed or whoever and have a medical home, have a doctor that they can build a relationship with and go there on an annual basis. Even if it's just to test their blood sugar or their blood pressure. So they're not going to a doctor when there's blood in the stool or their blood pressure is through the roof, to be proactive and go in to see a doctor as soon as they can. And if they go in and see a doctor and the doctor does their blood test and they go home and they're good to go, that's what we want. We want to get in front of these diseases.
Awesome. Thank you. So you hit the first two topics, the statistics and the most deadly cancers. The next thing we're going to talk about is addressing men's avoidance of seeing doctors in a timely manner. And we'd like Dr. Gallman to start and tell us what the women in their life can do to help.
I like to tell my patients two things. One is that, unfortunately, most men take better care of their cars than they do their bodies.
Mm.
And make sure that the car stays tuned up and gets overhauled whenever needed. The other thing is to point out that women live longer than men, and married men live longer than single men. That says something. Uh, now, I have deduced just from my own observation in my career that there are a lot of reasons. There are as many reasons for men, especially Black men's avoidance of doctors, as there are numbers of Black men that you speak to. One thing that keeps popping up is this whole idea of being macho. Especially in my area of gastroenterology, men have this fear of being penetrated. It's very interesting. It's a phenomenon. And I mentioned fear because a lot of times men come in and they're just so afraid of what might be found, to the extent that it almost freezes them. Then there's word of mouth, stories of horror experiences that other people have had, and that feeds into the fear. There's an intergenerational transmission of information, such as what happened with the Tuskegee experiment. Those things also trigger fear and reluctance. And finally, there's an area that's now being looked at very, very carefully. It's a new area of inquiry called epigenetics. And epigenetics is a non-traditional genetic way of passing on experiences. And so if my great-grandfather had an awful experience with a doctor, there's a chance that that experience may have been passed on to me. We don't understand a lot about that now, but it attacks that nature or nurture question. And to outline a few of the historical horror stories that are out there, one thing that I hear a lot of men say is, you're not going to experiment on me. And that seems to be a major concern. And it's also realistic because during the period of enslavement, the powers that be actually came up with quite a few pseudoscientific specialties. Craniometry was one of them, in which this doctor claimed that he could tell the intelligence of someone by measuring their skull. There were theories that people of African origin did not feel pain as well as other folk. And actually, unfortunately, this still is a problem. And I see it a lot. Before I concentrated on gastroenterology, I did some primary care. And my sickle cell patients hated to go to the emergency room because they were always accused of being drug seekers. And these young people were in agonizing pain. So they weren't treated. There were other illnesses that came up. Cachexia africana, which was a name that they gave for tuberculosis. And they were saying that tuberculosis was genetically passed on in people of African origin. Um, there was something called negritude, which was started by one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, Benjamin Rush, who said that negritude was an illness that turned your skin black. Drapetomania is probably one of the favorites. Some people pronounce it drapetomania, which was the disease that made enslaved Africans want to escape to freedom. You know, if you're enslaved and you want to be free, you got to be sick. And then there are those things that are more in recent memory. The whole idea of the eugenics phrase. And I mentioned the Tuskegee experiment, and the Tuskegee experiment was a direct result of eugenics. Eugenics was a pseudoscience in which people were trying to do engineering to produce a more perfect human being. So all people they considered defective in some way were cast aside in some way. A large percentage of the doctors who participated in the Tuskegee experiment were students of eugenics. And eugenics was so popular that during the latter part of the 18th century and the first third, I would guess, probably a little more up until maybe World War II, eugenics was actually taught in high schools, colleges, and medical schools to the extent that a lot of ideas that white people especially have of people of our African origin, especially if they don't come in daily contact with us, as a large percentage of whites in America don't. They have these beliefs that come from the teachings, the very effective teachings of the eugenics people. Um, Other things that eugenics did was forced sterilization. I remember having a young woman as a patient who was 22 years old and she had had a hysterectomy. And when I asked her why did she have a hysterectomy, all she could tell me is the doctor said I needed it. And I found out that there were physicians here in Columbia who were making a fortune taking out Black women's uteruses. It was so that extends into the present. And what's interesting though is more physicians began to move into Columbia and have access to medical privileges at the hospital. That practice has decreased. Um, we People may know about Henrietta Lacks, whose cells were used to study all kind of things, and she never got any credit or pay, even though the companies that used her cells have made literally billions of dollars. Um, So I could give names of folks for anyone who's interested and provide
Okay.
references. I'd be more than happy
Thank you
to
so much. I
to
think
do
I think
that.
we also wanted to ask you about the signs and symptoms that we should be aware of.
Well, in terms of colon cancer, frequently there are no symptoms until very, very late. That's why it's so dangerous. Um,
Is that something I mean, once you get past, was it 40? And now they're saying you should do maybe an annual or a biannual every other year
well, it
test.
depends on screening. I'm a really big proponent of screening, and I think that even though we have the stool test, the immuno test, the fecal immuno test, and the Cologuard, I still think that colonoscopy is the gold standard because if the fecal, we call it the FIT test, or the Cologuard is positive, you're going to still end up having a colonoscopy. Um, and I fought insurance companies for many, many years because um, even though the literature uh, repeatedly showed that people of African origin, especially men, but also women, develop colon cancer at an earlier age than the other folks, then they still insisted on starting screening at age 50. And I would always start at age 45 and have to struggle to get paid. And it got to the point where I just wrote it off because I felt more in tune with the good with my patients than I did with the insurance companies. Anemia is also another symptom. Now, the symptoms of anemia are very vague. You just feel weak, you feel tired all the time, you have no energy. And that comes from usually from slow blood loss. Um, you can lose blood so slowly that it's not visible to the human eye,
Hmm.
yet it continuously drops your hemoglobin level to the extent that you become very symptomatic. And actually, if your hemoglobin drops so low in those people who may have vascular disease, they can actually have heart attacks or strokes as a result of low hemoglobin. Um, Overt rectal bleeding is not real common with cancer, although it's something that if you have it, we need to look for it. But there are other reasons for bleeding that are a little bit more frequently, like hemorrhoids, diverticular disease, and abnormal blood vessels that we call AVMs. Other symptoms are change in your bowel habits or in the appearance of your bowels, losing your appetite, unexplained weight loss, um, uh, and by the time you develop pain from colon cancer, it's late. It's very late. Uh, and I would imagine that Mr. Moultrie is going to discuss some of the symptoms of prostate, unless you want me to do that too.
No, yeah, that's probably a good transition. We want
Okay.
to talk a little bit about the cancer screenings that are available and at what age. I think Miss Melanie Slant is going to talk about that for us. And you're on mute, Melanie. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. Before I start, I'd like to make one correction. I am a program manager with the Office of Community Outreach Engagement. Our director is Dr. Marvella Ford. Okay. Now, with regards to cancer screenings, it was mentioned previously the 5 cancers that are screenable: breast, I know, of course, we're talking about men, but breast, colorectal, lung, prostate, and what did I miss? Breast, lung, colorectal,
Cervical.
prostate, cervical. Thank you. Thank you. And so there are various age guidelines, and I'll go through them briefly. They are going to provide a template of all of this information, so you'll be able to look at it and refer back to it later. Um, as Dr. Galman mentioned, with regards to colorectal cancer, mentioned screening at age 45 when the recommendation was 50, and then of course having trouble getting reimbursed. But thankfully that age has been lowered, and so now our providers won't have that struggle because they're seeing so many young people um, being diagnosed with colon cancer. So that's a win as far as colon cancer is concerned. But when we think about overall signs and symptoms to be aware of, and this is regards to all of the cancers, which was mentioned, a change in bowel or bladder habits, sores that don't heal, obvious changes in a mole or wart, and of course, we're talking in particular about skin cancer, um, unusual vaginal bleeding or discharge, a new lump or thickening in the breast anywhere, or difficulty swallowing or frequent indigestion. So that could be indicative of, oral type cancer or throat cancer, and a bothersome cough or hoarseness. There again, maybe a throat cancer or a lung cancer issue. So those are overall warning symptoms. Um, and when we talk about prevention, prevention is key when we're talking about cancer care. The earlier we can detect something, the more curable it is. We don't have to worry about that cancer coming back. When we talk to our community groups, and we do several cancer education training initiatives within the Office of Community Outreach and Engagement, and I always say to someone, would you rather cure a cold or rather worry about dealing with pneumonia? A cold is a lot easier to deal with. And so we want to catch these things early. And this is why screening is so important. As Dr. Galvin mentioned, you don't want to wait until you're having pain or some excessive bleeding. So if something is bothering you, something is off, you want to go to your doctor. That's why, as Henry Well mentioned, it's so important to have that medical home. So important to have that doctor that you go to on a regular basis, who knows you through and through, who knows your family history. So when we're talking about cancer prevention, family history is also important. And that's something that a lot of families do not talk about. They're not open when it comes to talking about a cancer diagnosis. And I see it a lot when it's in regards to a breast or prostate cancer. We don't want to talk about those things, but we have to get away from that and understand that it's so important. If you yourself have a prostate cancer or in my case, I had breast cancer. That was important for my daughter to know. That's not something I would want to keep as a secret. Um, my husband is a prostate cancer survivor. We have sons. That's important for them to know and important for their health as they mature and as they have sons of their own or even daughters of their own with respect to breast. And I keep throwing that in, and I know we're talking specifically about men, but of course, men do get breast cancer as well. So we want to, prevention is the key when it comes to early diagnosis of a cancer and it being treatable. So pay attention to those warning signs. And there are some age guidelines specific to certain cancers. So with colon, age 45 now is the recommendation. With regard to lung, age 50 to 77, particularly if you are a smoker or if you have stopped smoking in the last 15 years. With regard to oral cancers, like cancers of the tongue, the throat, we want to, as early as age 18, because there's no particular screening test for oral cancers, but think about when you go to the dentist. that dentist will do a visual check as well. So not just concerned with the teeth, but then doing a visual check, because that could be the very first point of seeing something abnormal. So keeping that in mind. And when we're talking about oral cancers, I want to interject that HPV is very important. HPV is a major contributor to a lot of oral cancers. And we recommend the HPV for children, boys and girls, ages 11 to 12 to start that, but they can even administer that vaccine as young as age 9. And adults can receive it up to age 45, and that is very important. And some people may think about the vaccination being just for young people, but when we talk about oral cancers and the other cancers, there are 6 other cancers that are attributable to HPV. And and those are not just specific to young people, so we need to be aware. Um, Prostate cancer, be screened at age 50. However, if you have a family history, you want to start screening at 40 to 45. In particular, as was mentioned before, Black men, we die at a higher rate. Our incidence is even higher. So we want to be screened earlier because we have a higher risk factor when it comes to prostate cancer. And with skin cancer, at all ages, we want to be careful about our sun exposure. And when we looked at that overall list of signs and symptoms, think about a wart or a mole that's changing, or a sore that doesn't heal. Those are your warning signs. So just keep that in mind. And please do take a look at the resources at the end of this, because it'll just be a good reminder for you to know when you should have certain screenings.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Our next question is going to go to Mr. Lee Moultrie. I've been diagnosed. What should I do now?
That is an excellent question. And I think it's very important that we understand that question there, because of the fact, once you get diagnosed, I'll throw a scripture here that I want everyone to center on. And that scripture would be, lean not to thine own understanding. Get in the counsel of other friends, doctors that you know, have a conversation. But first off, once you're diagnosed, listen intently to your doctor giving you the different treatment options that you can use. Remember, if you're diagnosed with cancer, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to die. And I mean of breast cancer, lung cancer, or whatever. Seeing that we're talking about prostate cancer, once you have that diagnosis, then you set up a time to come back and speak with your doctor, if they don't have that information then, on the various treatment options. Then you find out from your fraternity brother, your church brother, or anyone else that may have journeyed with prostate cancer, and you have a conversation with them and you say, I was diagnosed, how did you go about it? What are some support groups that I can connect myself with? I am, as you indicated earlier, I am part of the Prostate Health Education Network. We want men to go on these websites now before you're diagnosed, whereas into the fact, if you or anyone else is diagnosed in the future, you already have this information. You have Ms. Land right here with the Hollings Cancer Center. You have Dr. Gallman that's sending us some information also. You have Henry Well with the Cancer Alliance. All of these resources, we want you to spread it out into the community now. As they indicated, Sometimes you may not have a symptom for the cancer. I started being screened for cancer in 1994 at 39 years old. I was not diagnosed until 2015, 20 years later. And what I ended up doing, because my cancer was caught based on me having a urinary problem. My doctor and I were trying to figure it out. And then we did a biopsy, and then we detected the cancer. It was a slow growing cancer. So he says, Lee, it's a slow growing cancer. You don't have to rush into anything. So what did I do? I did what we would call, it's two terms, active surveillance or watchful waiting. And what that meant was we monitored, instead of me having blood exam, the PSA, done once a year, we were doing it twice a year. And then I also adjusted my diet and I started exercising more. All of those things delayed me having treatment for 6 years. So those are the things that we want men to understand, that you don't have to rush into these things. And the men that are listening, women who are listening, guys, brothers, what I want you to do is to set up a network of 3, 4, 5, 6 other guys. You start on a quarterly basis talking to each other about different health things as you talk about football, baseball, or whatever. And if you get diagnosed with something, talk with those guys. But then also, again, you have all of us here on this site here to reach out to us and ask us a question. And how do we leverage it? Now, when they told you earlier that I was an ambassador for Hollings Cancer Center with the Amen Project, the Proton Center out of Jacksonville, Florida, and the Prostate Health Education Network out of Boston. What am I saying with that? I have access to all of these different doctors and facility. You send me a question, I will send it to them. We leverage those relationships that we get you some kind of response on what you're addressing. That's what we're doing. And also, when he indicated the SWOG, that is the Southwest Oncology Group that I was appointed to that committee for the next board for the next 5 years. My last thing I'll throw out here, I think sometime when we look at men rushing into treatment, men are not going into support groups. If you got diagnosed with cancer, find a support group you can connect with before treatment, preferably, and or afterwards. If you see an educational session going on, I'm trying to get them to change that name from prostate cancer education thing to change it to be prostate health /cancer. Because we want to educate you before you get diagnosed so you don't go into a panic attack. And you can talk with other men who have already been on this journey, like me for 9 years, Melanie's husband for a number of years. So we can do this. But we need you to become more active, whether you in any church, you in any fraternity, you just somebody else out in the community. We want you to be more engaged with other men, be it white, black, Hispanic, or whatever, dealing with prostate health and prostate cancer and the cancers that Henry talked about, the lung and colorectal. So I'll wait for any other questions from here.
Okay,
and thank you for the opportunity to be a part.
Yeah, well, thank you for that information. We're doing well on time, I think. Let me do a quick follow-up with you. Can you talk to us about what it really looks like for screening, particularly for prostate cancer? We've heard people say that there's fear around it. Are we talking about just getting a blood test and monitoring PSA levels? Are we talking about what particularly are we talking about with this prostate cancer screening?
Okay, so what we're talking about, we're doing a blood test. That's all it is. You go to a regular lab, They do a blood draw, they send it to the lab, they got the number, and they make the determination based on that. Then there's another test called the digital rectal exam. As Dr. Goldman indicated earlier, sometimes there's some phobias behind that, but we have to understand that is complement, that's a part of the other test. The blood test we did, then the doctor is able to feel that prostate itself. And whatever he or she feels, if it's not feeling the way it should be, then he or she can recommend that we do a biopsy to find out more detailed information. All of this right here is painless, okay? What I share with guys is we have to go through this. And once we've gone through this, it helps the doctor make the next recommendation for us. Okay, so you have the PSA, the blood test, and the digital rectal exam. And from what I've talked to the doctors for the past 24 years, there's no doctor is really excited to be doing a digital rectal exam. Okay, but they're doing it because they have to do it to help us. And we need as many men. When I did my test in 1994, they were recommending it for all men 40 and over. And then I came there at 39 years old, and I read it in the newspaper. And they said, well, sir, you're not old enough to do it. But I became insistent upon that, asking them to do it. And they said, well, sir, since you're insistent, you want to get it done, we'll do it. And I did it every year after that. So it can be a little uncomfortable to do the digital rectal exam, but understand that's a part of the screening process to help the doctor help you live a little longer, and or what are the next steps that he's going to do, he or she going to help you in your healthcare journey.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Our next question is, what diet and lifestyle habits increase cancer risks? And then what changes can reduce cancer with? And we're going to start with Ms. Melanie Slin on that one.
Okay. So a few recommendations. One thing I would like to throw out there, and then again, this will be a part of the resource materials that everyone who's watching will receive. We have two programs. We have a prostate cancer screening education program for African American men. We also have a program called Moving Up. It is a cancer education program, and we discuss all of the cancers, not just prostate. But within those two programs, we talk about cancer prevention and a healthy lifestyle and how that contributes to cancer prevention. And some of the things that we recommend is that, first of all, a healthy diet. You want to eliminate the fats and things like that. You want to focus on healthy fats. You want to eat more fruit, vegetables. And a lot of you hear this just with your regular doctor visits. And these things are good for heart health as well as cancer prevention. So you're taking care of two things at once. If you alter your diet, make some, and a step at a time, changes with the healthy eating practices. Exercise, we talked about exercise earlier. So important to get your body moving. You can start out with walking. You don't have to go to the gym right away and lift weights and do all that heavy stuff. Work your way up to it. Just walk, get moving. Okay. Other things, we talked about the screening guidelines. So get your annual screenings, go to your doctor. That goes a long way towards detecting any cancers. Smoking, tobacco use, and not just smoking, but tobacco use. All of those things are detrimental to your health and is a high risk factor for developing cancer. So we encourage stop smoking. Alcohol, if you already do consume alcohol, limit your intake. It's very important. And going back to dietary measures, foods that are high in fat and limiting red meat, also for consideration. We talked about sun exposure with regards to skin cancer. That's all very important as well. So diet, exercise, alcohol consumption, tobacco consumption, all of these things go towards prevention of cancer and towards your overall health as well.
Awesome. Help me. You talk about sun exposure.
Mhm.
Black folks, are they supposed to use sunscreen? What else are we saying?
Yes,
Yeah, the sun. What are you
people
saying?
that, have that, the myth that Black people can't get skin cancer. That is not true. So we need to protect ourselves as well. And I will defer for more detailed information to Dr. Galman as a clinician, but we need to protect ourselves as well in the sun.
Okay, Dr. Gallman, I wanted to follow up with you about those lifestyle habits.
Sure. And it's Gallman.
Gallman. Okay, sorry.
Gallman. I used to teach in a middle school before I went to medical school, and my students used to call me Gallbladder Man.
Uh-oh.
I think that the points made are extremely important. I just like in terms of prostate and colon cancer, we eat too much meat, we eat too many processed foods. Um, I hear people preaching the virtues of bacon every day. And it's unfortunate because, bacon, fried foods, and high fat content foods are definitely causing a lot of cancers. One of the things that I preach, and I do a lecture on this that I really enjoy because I enjoy watching people's um, facial expressions when I tell them that they shouldn't eat red meat anymore. And the other thing is high fiber diet. High fiber diet is extremely important for a lot of different reasons. It can be preventative for colon cancer. And by eating high fiber, you also provide some protection against other types of cancer. Um, One of the common things that I see as a gastroenterologist is constipation. Um, the American public is very constipated. I like to tease. That's why folks are so vicious and so can be so very much violent because they're constipated. I think all folks need to
Excuse
enjoy.
me, Dr. Gallman. Can you turn your
Oh,
camera
I'm
on?
sorry. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
thank you.
I think all folk need to ingest at least our bodies need 25 to 40 grams of fiber a day. And the average American diet contains less than 15 grams.
So
So
give us some examples of what fiber we should be looking for.
fruits, vegetables, um, and bran fiber. And the thing is that we as a society have become so into the quick fix. We want a pill, something wrong, give me a pill, give me some medicine. And the fact is that if we eat right, I would say that 60 or more percent of the illnesses that we suffer from would be eliminated if we would just eat right. And if you add exercise to that, the number goes up exponentially. So in that way, we can be our own worst enemies. So giving a laxative for somebody with constipation is really not doing them any good. I remember having a lady come into my office with problems with constipation, and I gave her my little high fiber diet speech, and she became incensed. She said, I came in here, I'm paying for you to tell me just to eat. I want some medicine. But as it turns out, she went home and she decided to follow that advice because I had written materials that I gave her. And when she came back into my office in 4 months, she hugged my neck and apologized
All right.
because it was a radical change. And so often we, and I include myself in that number, care more about comfort and taste than we do longevity and health. And I think that those are some things that we've been trained to be. We're hedonistic in that to that extent because of the hedonistic nature of our society. But I think that at some point we really have to get into what one of my professors, one of my teachers used to call the essential selfishness of survival.
Yeah. There's some short-term pain. You tell people they can't have bacon and red meat though. So I understand. I understand.
Oh yeah. You should see some of the looks that I've gotten.
I bet. I think Lee, are you on mute? Because you want to say something? I'm not hearing you.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up with Dr. Goldman shared. I After I left the prostate cancer treatment in 2022, they told me that my blood, all throughout the 8 weeks I was there, they keep saying my blood pressure too high, my blood pressure too high, my blood. So I became fearful of having a stroke or a heart attack. Then my A1C for my diabetes had went 7.1, never went there. So I was apprehensive of fearful also of having full-blown diabetes and having amputation. So what I did was I changed my diet. I was looking at South Carolina ETV, see Dr. Hyman on there talking about changing your diet. I changed my diet. And I became, as he's talking, as Dr. Goldman and Melanie is talking about, my diet, I started preparing my food, my traditional food, differently. Whereas my three main course is cabbage, collard greens, and okra soup. But I just don't put the old stuff that I used to put in there, fat back and all that craziness in there. Okay. And that's what I do. And then I started exercising a little bit more. I started doing water aerobics. I started walking. I did all this stuff. I lost 35 pounds and I started drinking a smoothie first thing in the morning. So the smoothie kept me for a minimum of 4 hours without any food, 7 hours at the max. And then I would have my lunch afterwards. So what ended up happening is within 4 months, I lost 35 pounds. Then I went to MUSC and they had a test called a body composition analysis. They said, okay, Mr. Moultrie, you're 66 years old, but since you changed your diet, you started exercising more. We started talking about longevity. They said, now you're 66 years old numerically, but since you changed your diet, you started exercising more, your body is performing as a 60-year-old. And as Dr. Goldman was speaking about the different foods that we're eating, those up, it's called ultra processed food. That's what it's called. And then also when Dr. Goldman is talking about medicine, he's being nice because he's in that field. So I'll give you another term for that. It's called chemicals. People are putting chemicals in their body, and we don't know what's going to happen to your body after so long. and even using ultra-processed food that we're feeding to our children, and they're overweight and they're being diagnosed with adult onset diseases at a young age. So we have to be real with each other and start exercising. If we did, as Melanie said earlier, if we just started the small exercises of walking, doing 30 minutes of walking per day. If you can't do 30 minutes at one time, do 10 minutes for breakfast, 10 minutes for lunch, 10 minutes for dinner. You have 30 minutes there. That's why the flyer that came out, you had the illustration on it, says, is talking to a patient is talking to the doctor. The patient tells the doctor, "Doctor, I'm too busy to exercise. I'm too busy to exercise." And then the doctor asks the patient, "Well, what works best for your busy schedule? Exercising 1 hour a day or being dead 24 hours a day?"
Yeah.
And it's supposed to elicit a chuckle. That it's supposed to do that.
Right.
But we need to get the message. We're tired of being nice to people, and you're dying at an early age.
There it
We're
is.
tired of people. For us to be on here now, including Henry, we're tired of people dying prematurely.
Yeah.
We
very
want to
good.
talk about the blue zone where you live to be 100 years old and older in good health. So I'll just wait for that.
Thank you. Now we're going to the point where we have a couple questions from people who are watching, but I skipped a question from Miss Melanie Sland, and that question was, what do I do if I don't have insurance?
So I will share a couple of great resources here in the state of South Carolina. First, right here in the Charleston area, we have Palmetto Project. You can access them online at palmettoproject.org. And this will also be shared with the resources. You can call them up. They will help you either apply Medicaid, Medicare, within the marketplace for the Affordable Care Act, whatever your needs are, they're going to sit down with you and discuss what is best for you, what is affordable for you, and they will help you either by phone or online, or even in person. You can go to the office. That information will be shared. Also, SC Thrive, SC for South Carolina Thrive, another organization that will assist with applying for insurance if you do not have insurance, helping you find the best plan for you, and also helping you access other resources, financial resources. If you have what we call it, food insecurity, you might be working, but you just don't have enough at the end of the week or end of the month. So resources to help you supplement food as well. And so those two major resources can help you if you do not have health insurance. I would also like to add, when we're talking about being able to afford screenings, some require a copay. There are a lot of free clinics around. There are fairly qualified health centers within your area, county to county throughout the state. And so check into those as well, because they will assist you with getting the necessary screenings. They use what they call a sliding scale based on your income and family size. But pick up the phone, make the call. Don't just sit and say, I can't afford it. There is a resource out there that can help you. And thank you so much for forums like this, to put that information out there.
Awesome. And I think most of those are on the slide information that we have. So thank you so much for doing that. We have a question from the audience. I think we're going to first start, and everybody can answer this, but I'll start with Mr. Henry Well first. The question is, I have an enlarged prostate. Can eating healthier shrink my prostate?
So that is a medical question. So I would defer to Dr. Gallman on that.
Very good. Okay, sure, Dr. Gallman.
Well, as I said, the prostate is a little east of my territory, but I don't think so. I think that what happens with men is as we get older, our prostates get larger. And that's just the luck of getting older. Because when you consider the alternative, I think I'd rather have a big prostate. Um, and I don't think that there's anything that we can necessarily do about it. Um, and the PSA can also sometimes be uh, elevated with just a non-cancerous enlarged prostate. Um, so that is one of the limitations of the PSA, but as Mr. Well mentioned, that's what we have, and I think we need to use it. Um, and I think it has served us well. Um,
Did you have something to add, Lee Moultrie?
Moultrie?
Yeah, as Dr. Goldman said, that's as he said, and he puts it in such a nice way. That's one of the beauties of getting older. As we get older, most of us will have that situation. But he leads me into a thing to understand that we didn't talk about: second and third opinions. If you got diagnosed with prostate cancer or any cancer, remember, you have an opportunity to go to another doctor, wherever it is, a second or third opinion. Now, it's important that you read these information that we have on the website here, that they'll come out with these documents. We have a precision medicine study and also in our DNA. As Melanie was speaking about her having cancer, her daughter having cancer, her husband having cancer, we have a DNA study that you can do to find out for your family. Now, with you learning all of this information, because you're talking about longevity, as Dr. Goldman spoke about a few minutes ago. If your doctor is not giving you as much information as you should have, or you think you should have, I ended up terminating my doctor. I fired my doctor and I went out of state to get treatment that I needed to have, because they didn't have the latest technology to help me with my cancer. So don't be apprehensive or fearful. If you don't like what's going on, get a second opinion, a third opinion. And if you got to go out of state also, because you're dealing with your life, be it a woman or a man or a child dealing with cancer.
Before we move to the next question, I'd just like to interject that, a lot of what we're talking about is all coming full circle. And the question that was asked about, could they take something or do anything to shrink the prostate? The doctor who specializes in that is a urologist. And so starting out with that family practitioner, that regular doctor that you see, if that's a problem, then he or she will recommend you to that specialist, that urologist, who can specifically answer that question for you. But it all goes back to having that relationship with a doctor on a regular basis.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to read some of the questions and answers that Mr. Henry Well has given us. Someone has asked, a lot of teens and young adults are vaping. Can vaping cause lung cancer too? And he answered yes. Is there any additional information that you want to talk about that? No? Okay, you're on mute. But the second question he answered was, someone asked, can you give us some suggestions for convincing someone to go to the doctor? And his answer was, tell them you love them and you want them to live longer. Does anybody have any other suggestions or advice in those areas?
Talk about death.
Talk about death.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Very
you
good.
can also, we can talk about death, which is true. But the power about the second and third opinion to help the individual understand there may be an answer for you. Again, my diagnosis with cancer was based on me having a urinary problem, and they discovered it then. So people, and that's why we spoke about the blue zone, where people live to be 100 years old and older, in good shape, in good health. So individual right now, whatever age you are, we don't want you dying before 75 because that's premature. Anything before 75. Your family don't want to be hurting. Your family doesn't want to be crying at a funeral. You don't want your daughter, your son, your grandchild, your friends, your homies to be missing you. So please consider start getting checked annually. One thing that when you spoke about, if I don't have medical care, don't forget the military. If anyone spent any time in the military, you can go to the VA for health care. Even if you got discharged dishonorably for the military, you can apply for them to change that from dishonorable to honorable discharge, and then you would have access to the VA healthcare system also.
Awesome.
I could add something. It's very interesting. I work at the VA, and it's interesting how so many veterans rail against socialism and socialized medicine, and the VA is a perfect example of that. But to get back to an earlier question, I had a, a couple. They were both my patients, and the husband was very hard-headed and uncooperative, and the wife was trying her best to get him to do right. And the way that she finally got him to do right was she let him know that she was increasing his insurance.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. So right now, I don't have any other questions from people watching. So what I'm going to try to do is post all of the great resources by sharing my screen. And if anybody wants to talk about those, I know you already have, but I just want to show them on the screen. People can screenshot it. And then if there anything that you guys wanted to say that you didn't, now's a good time for that. And I'll let you talk while I try to share my screen here.
Well, I'd like to just,
But we have, go
if there
ahead,
are any questions about anything that I've said, or if there's a desire for any references, I'd be more than happy to give my email address and do my best to supply you with all the information that you want, and probably more than you want.
That's not
right. And I don't know, can someone put it in the chat? I think our chat is just for the panelists.
right.
But
are you guys seeing the great resources?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
We are. I would just say go see your doctor or go see a doctor.
and I would say I echo all that we're saying, and along the line, we have the DNA study that I spoke about earlier, and I'll send it to the church that you can put on your website, that people can take a free DNA test to find out whether you have any traits of cancer, as Melanie was speaking about earlier. It's free. And also we have another test at the Medical University of South Carolina on precision medicine. It's a focus group that they're going to do, but it's a one page summary that they're going to ask you also. So we're going to do that. So I'll send it to the folks, and you can put it on the website. It's the red cap that I have there. And I love, as Dr. Gallman, there was another doctor down here in Charleston, Dr. Fisher. Dr. Fisher would come into the meeting and he would say, just like Dr. Gallman, we ain't got time to play with you. Let's stop playing. Let's be real. And I told the women that at church years ago also when they wouldn't stop smoking. Who was it? Who was doing the smoking? I think Melanie. Could you elaborate on cigar smoking? Because I was at an event in Orangeburg today, and I asked them that question because I see so many guys who thinking that they didn't arrive and they're smoking these cigars. Well, I'm going to the island. I'm gonna kick back and drink some yak and do cigars. Can you elaborate on the what's your standing on the cigars also?
So the tobacco, I mean, specifics regarding tobacco use is a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. Um, so I mean, it's specific to cigars. So another member of our cancer control team would be better equipped to discuss if you're talking cigars in particular, but with regard to any type of tobacco, we say stop. And there are many methods that are available to help with stopping smoking, or tobacco cessation, as we call it. But yes, I will have to defer to someone else on my cancer control team in regards to cigar smoke. Now, one thing I would like to add before we leave is to mention our Moving Up Cancer Education Program. I did share a flyer, and I'm not sure if you have that tonight to share, but if you could provide my email and phone contact information here at the Cancer Center, we are happy to come to your church, your civic group, fraternity, for sorority. We travel the state of South Carolina, so we would love to bring this information. And that Moving Up program is a train the trainer program. So then you will be equipped to do that training within
Okay.
your community and forward. Also, the SC Amen Prostate Cancer Program. This program, the focus is African American men between 40 and 69 years old. We do an education session, and then we follow up with 3 months of navigation. The ultimate goal is navigation to prostate cancer screening. It is so important. We need to bring those numbers down. Our men, are dying at 2.3 times a higher rate than other populations. So we have the means to do this. We have the information. If we're talking about where do I go, I don't have insurance. I don't know where to go, who to talk to, or whatever. We are your resource. Okay, so please make sure you get this information. So we would love to bring these particular cancer prevention initiatives. And then once again, the HPV vaccination. A lot of people think of it just as for children, but we're thinking downstream how those high-risk HPV virus can cause cancers. Six
Okay.
different cancers that are caused by the HPV virus. And we have the means through vaccination.
And it,
So reach out to me. We'd
thank you.
love to bring the
If
program
you're
to you.
if you're willing, can you go ahead and put your preferred contact information in the
Yes.
I see that Lee Moultrie has done that.
Mhm. I will do that.
Hey,
Awesome.
Brother Lane.
Yes.
Also, anyone that has prostate cancer right now, you can, if you're in the local area, you can find this magazine in the Harris Teeter Health Link magazine. And they have a project that we did. It's called Survivors Thrive at MUSC Strength Camp. We're having another camp on January 30th. So we need people to sign up for that also. So we'll put the link in there. And it was also in the local Post in Korea, this article last Monday. And the guys online might not know who this is, but this right here, the guy right here, this is Miss Melanie Sland's husband right there.
Uh-oh. Okay. Nice. So we got a few more questions. Can someone talk about how diabetes causes blindness? Is anybody's wheelhouse to talk about that? And then I saw Henry had to drop off. There's a question about the free screenings in the PD or other areas of the state? Is anybody able to discuss that?
Well, in terms of the diabetes, not being, again, that's not my expertise, but I think that it's all related to effects of blood sugar on the blood vessels. And the blood vessels in the eye are affected. And
Okay.
that's one thing. And with regard to the cigar uh, smoke, even if you don't, obviously, if you inhale, that's bad. But even if you don't inhale, the contact of tobacco with your mouth probably increases the chances of mouth cancer, throat and tonsillar cancer with cigars and pipe smokes.
Okay.
And also what we'll do is, as Ms. Land was indicating, Matthew Carpenter does this project with the tobacco. So we'll make sure you have a flyer that you can put on the page also with all of the information. For the programs and the PD that Henry was speaking of, you can go to the South Carolina Cancer Alliance website and you see the various locations that people can go to find the screenings throughout the state of South Carolina.
Okay. Awesome. I'm gonna share my screen again, so hopefully people can make sure that they screenshot that. But we'll get that information out to folks. There was another question that I had to follow up. I know we're winding down here. Someone talked about a new book that came out. Did they want to? Can someone show that book or at least talk about it? I'll pull down the screen here in a second. Hold on, give me 5 seconds. And then from a broader picture, maybe Gallman can talk about it, but anybody can answer. We talked about all these disparities, all these issues with medical training that still happen today. What are we doing, and how can we support more, I guess, more Black doctors, more Black nurses, more Black professionals, so that we can have the representation we need to help us get through some of these issues? And let me unsquare the screen so you can show that book. Maybe Dr. Gorman can talk about that briefly.
Okay. Again, you have the years of our captivity in America have created some significant problems. I used to do a weekly radio program in Columbia for almost 25 years. And I was doing a program on health and on medicine because it was usually on current events, African American history and culture, as well as health. And I had a young man to call up and say that he would never go to a Black doctor because Black doctors were not as smart and didn't know what they were doing and would kill people. And I was very disappointed. I can't say I was shocked, but I was very disappointed. And it points to a lot of that self-hatred. There are a large number of books, and I'd be more than happy. I don't have them on hand, but to talk about racism in medicine, that's been a extremely frequent study. I'm not familiar with that book, Legacy. I plan to get it so I can add it to my my library. But
But in your opinion, Dr. Gorman, are there programs that are helping fight the racism in medicine? And
no,
are there a pro? No, okay, nothing
no.
good there. All right, can you speak, Lee? Because maybe I don't think people could see unless you're speaking. You were showing that book.
Okay, this was just discussed on CBS News yesterday morning with Gail King. And the author gives various situations that she went through as a doctor and recommendations that we can be working through. Now, as Dr. Goldman, as you asked the question, are we working through different things now in the healthcare arena? Well, we have a lot of equity councils and working towards changing different mindsets of people holistically throughout the whole nation. Everyone is working together. It might be a little slower for some people, but we have to understand when we talk about all of these African American doctors, well, we're only 13% of the population. I think some people forget that. So you can never have all Black doctors, all Black nurses. But what I would suggest, if you do know an African American student in medical school or nursing, and you can support them economically, go ahead and do that, because they may have some economic challenges and their family and the community. If you want to set up a trust to help a foundation to help these students, that's what do. Go ahead, Dr. Goldman.
No, I wanted to add, you mentioned we're 13% of the population, but only 4% of all physicians are Black, less than 4.
Wow.
And, in terms of that, for many years, I used to have a shadowing program every summer, and I would have as many as 6 students shadowing me. This is before the HIPAA took over, and they would come in to watch procedures if the patient gave permission. And I did that for about almost 15 years. Interestingly, of the dozens of students that passed through my program, only 3 became physicians because they saw what the life was like. But there are programs, and I think then what I would like to add then, my emphatic no to your question, Mr. Lane, was based on a word, effective.
Okay.
And there are programs. I have to admit that I'm a little, it's very difficult to improve something when someone is not only actively fighting against you, but you're trying to use the tools that they are using to fight against you in order to defeat them.
Right, right. But the stakes are high. We gotta keep on pressing.
No, we have to come up with other ways, and I think and there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah.
Well, the one thing I was speaking with a group in Orangeburg this afternoon with the tobacco group, and I shared with them, as Dr. Goldman just shared there. I said, when you see a situation, and to break it down as small as possible, I said, don't hate the player when a situation is going on. Learn the game and change and win. So we have to be smart enough to learn the game that's been going on, adjust where necessary. It's not going to be overnight, but we're going to take our time and slowly. It's like saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. How do we save lives? We save lives by coming to the screenings, educational session that Ms. Sland and the rest of the folks are doing at MUSC. How do we change these things, what's going on? Stop smoking and have come to these different sessions. Do the screening test, the DNA test, to find out what's happening in your families and your trait, and what are you passing on to your next generation, that we can make some adjustments. All of these things are active. If you're spending, what we would like you to do, half of that time you're spending on football, basketball, Facebook, and everything else, you must learn about your health, because you said your body is your temple. This is a church meeting.
That's right. That's right.
And what my thing is, optimism is, if we can get all of the church leaders to come together and come to the health department, come to MUSC and say, our men, especially with Dexter King just dying the other day at 62 years old.
That's right. That's
the
right.
leaders come together and say to the health department, to MUSC, we're going to do everything that you say to do for our men to be living longer. If we need to adjust our diet, as Dr. Gallman talked about, that's what we're going to do. If we need to do the Move Up program that Melanie Slan have over there, we're going to do that. If we're going to be screened early, we're going to do all of that. But it takes the church leaders. The majority of churches in the Black community are Black men. And if we know that there's a disproportionate amount of Black men dying from prostate cancer, this is an active thing for them to take lead on, have a press conference, say to the health department, the state health department, we want you here. MUSC, we want you here. Roper Hospital, we want you here. Prism Hospital in Columbia, we want you here. VA Hospital, we want you here because we as Black church leaders, fraternity members, we're going to make changes in our lives, and we're going to lead by being on the front line to make it happen. If not, what else is going to do? Who we going to blame?
Very good. Thank you so much. I want to thank all the panelists. We've run out of time. You answered one of the questions that was shot up there about what to do if they don't know their family history. I think that was basically get the DNA test or work with your doctor. Are there any last words before we shut this down?
I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity.
Well, thank you all for being here.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Everyone, have a good day.
Nice meeting you, Dr. Goldman.